About 10 years ago, I was facing some significant commercial challenges with something, but I was really stressed out by something else that was going on at the same time. I was under a lot of pressure, and I knew that I had to recover a clear head fast. Otherwise, it was all going to go horribly wrong. My name's Steve, and I coach professional people just like you to make a peaceful mind your professional superpower. And a good place to start is with my free, simple 5-step guide to mastering stress in the moment. So here's the situation. I'm working professionally in an organization and there's some strained commercial relationships. It's my job to sort it out. I needed to meet with the service delivery director of a supplier, and the two organizations had got into a disagreement about service performance metrics. I knew that I needed to have an impeccably clear head to have a productive conversation, to get clear about potentially complex matters, and to not get bamboozled or rolled over in the conversation. It needed to be a conversation that would be productive, that would strengthen the relationship between the two organizations and deal with the points of disagreement in a productive way. But the thing is, on the day that I was meant to have this meeting, I had had a phone call, an issue that had arisen in my personal life. Now, I didn't really have the headspace for that personal conversation with this commercial conversation looming, but at the same time, it was something that concerned me, it worried me, and it made me a little bit stressed. In fact, who am I kidding? It made me a lot stressed. So I went into the conversation, I was not clear, I did not have the clarity that I needed to have. I mean, it started off okay. We started talking, I started to present my points, but I didn't have the clarity that I needed. I didn't have the level-headedness that I needed. And the conversation started to get derailed. I had visions of it all going horribly wrong and it being my fault. I had visions of getting told off about it and either having to start again from scratch or having to back away while somebody else did it. But you know, the things that I teach now as a coach are not new to me. I knew a lot of this then. So even though I'd got myself into a bit of a kerfuffle, I was able to catch myself and remember things that I'd learned. I remembered my learning with one of my coaches about groundedness and equanimity. Now, I know that those are words which don't particularly come up a lot, and not a lot of people will experience them. So let me explain what they mean. Groundedness, the way I experience it, is about being firm in an understanding of life which is empowering, as opposed to coming from a shaky understanding of life, or an understanding of life which is grounded in fear, ego and insecurity. Equanimity is the ability to maintain a peaceful balance of mind and emotion even when you're under pressure, to keep that clear head. Now, sometimes people misunderstand equanimity as being on an emotional flat line. It really isn't that. I mean, even when you master equanimity, you can still experience the joys of life and the sadnesses of life. It's just that you also have the ability to choose your attitude in any situation and to create and maintain a clear headspace and a clear emotion space. So I caught myself and I made this decision about how I was going to change my attitude in that moment. To listen, to understand, and to be explorative. I also remember that a great way to get a clear head is to get whatever's going on in your head out of your head and onto paper. I decided to excuse myself for a moment, get my notebook and just write down things that I needed to get out of my head so I could create that clear headspace. Now from that I was able to go back into the conversation. My emotions were level, my communication was clearer, and we started to make some headway. But we did hit a stumbling block, and something started happening which I didn't expect to happen based on what I'd experienced before. And that is that those thoughts started creeping back into my head. The things I was concerned about started to creep back into my head. And I thought, oh, it's going wrong again. The conversation started to get confrontational, it started to get defensive, and I really couldn't understand why. I really couldn't understand why getting this thing out of my head and onto paper hadn't worked. Now I was really starting to feel the pressure in this conversation. The rapport started to break down, we both started getting a little bit defensive, and again I had visions of this conversation going wrong and as not really resolving what we'd meant to resolve. So at that time I just thought, I have to have another break. I have to get 5 minutes away from this. So we agreed to a coffee break and I went into the gents and I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, what's going on here? But then I remembered something else that I'd temporarily forgotten. And that is, in order to successfully get something out of your head and onto paper, you can't just write it down. But you also have to make an agreement with yourself, an agreement with your unconscious mind, if you like. And that's an agreement about what action you're going to take and when. That's when the nagging can stop. So I hurried back to my desk and I got my notebook out again. I got to the bit where I'd written down what was on my mind. And I kind of realized that what I needed to do is I needed to phone a specific person, and I knew I was going to be able to phone that specific person once this meeting was over, maybe about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I made that decision. I am going to phone so-and-so at 4 o'clock, and I wrote it down. Now that's what allowed me to put this baggage down. Now, some people will call this mental preparation or mental rehearsal. It's something that sports people do. They will visualize themselves running their race if they're a runner. The Stoics called it premeditation, to premeditate on how you're going to deal with things that are going to come up. Now, I also remembered at the same time that, of course, that I could use premeditation not only as a way of dealing with this other thing that I was worrying about. So I did a bit of mental rehearsal, premeditation on how I'm going to get this conversation back on track and how I'm going to deal with other curveballs that might come up. And it worked wonderfully well. I was able to go back into that conversation. We were able to recover the rapport. We were able to get the problem back on the table. We were able to have a productive conversation. Now, sometimes our work problems come home with us and we need ways to stop thinking about them once we are home. To deal with that, watch this video here. This is Steve, wishing you health and happiness.